I wish I was 16. I love 86. Mm-hmm.
It's like 2 years. Won't happen in my family.
I just want to tell you I was like 5, 8.
Okay, let's begin. So as promised, we're going to first go over the questions for the midterm exam. I'm not going to cover all of them in equal detail, just some of the most important problematic ones. That there was a tendency for students to make mistakes. Yeah, there's one note for you that your grade for some of you will be adjusted in the meantime slightly upward, because my attention was tuned that there was one question in the exam, question 11, that was not supposed to be in the exam because it covered material from chapter 11. It's which of the following items does not belong to the federal budget? Middle schools, teachers' salaries, interest payments on public debt, social security expenditures, funds for army and navy. The correct answer is A, the first, middle school teachers' salaries, because the financing of schools and education is a state responsibility. So if you answer that one correctly, everything is fine. If you miss the correct answer, I'm gonna increase your grade for 1 point, because I promise that I was not going to give you any questions. Okay, so that's that. So let me just briefly go over some of the multiple choice questions, but I will spend most of the time, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, on the 2 essay questions. The biggest problems were with those questions, and especially with one of them. I'll talk about that in a moment. So question 1, income approach to calculating GDP uses consumption and investment as its components. That's false, because the income approach uses different types of income: rent, profit, interest, and so on. The consumption and investment are part of the expenditure method of calculating investment, consumption, government spending, and net expense. If a higher percentage of population ceases to actively seek jobs, how does that affect the labor force? Impossible to tell. It decreases it, it increases it, it does not change it. It decreases the labor force because the population that ceases to actively seek jobs, those are discouraged workers, and the labor force is employed people plus unemployed people. So then, if a percentage of total population that is neither employed nor actively seeking jobs, unemployed, that means the size of the labor force is shrinking. Labor force are employed plus employed. Okay, let's see. Which of the following, in normal average conditions in the United States, is not a scarce good? Coffee, coal, air, or timber? So, obviously air. What is the unit in which consumer price index in the USA is expressed? Can anyone do it? What is the unit for CPI? There is no unit, just a number. It was dollar, euro, quantity of products. There is no unit. The correct answer is there is no unit. A poor country with a large emigrant population in wealthier countries will have higher GNP than GDP. True or false? True, because GNP is an income earned by all nationals, all citizens of a given country. If large number of citizens of a poor country work in a wealthy country, their income will be higher than it would have been otherwise in the country of their citizenship. When you add up all Serbians who live in Serbia and in Germany together, they will earn much more than all Serbians who live in Serbia. Real balanced effect means that deflation forces people to reduce consumption. That's correct. An incorrect answer is inflation increases production, deflation decreases production, inflation forces people to reduce consumption. So remember the two, interest rate effect and real balance effect that influence the aggregate demand. Okay, I can see the federal budget. Okay. Questions? In the short run, there is a trade-off between inflation and real GDP produced. Trade-off between inflation and real GDP produced. Yes, because of this. This is CPI, this is real GDP, and this is short-run aggregate supply curve. So that means the higher CPI, the higher real GDP in the short run. So that's a trade-off between inflation, increase in CPI, and higher real GDP. The same trick question that we discussed: an economy grows for 10 years, then slumps for 1 quarter, and then starts growing again in the next quarter. What is the current state of that economy? Expansion, recession, recovery? It's possible to say. Expansion, because recession requires 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. Our economy has just 1 quarter, so it's still technically expansion. Total amount of spending, this is a problem that I mentioned maybe just during the lecture once, and then we haven't revisited it later on. So some people made mistakes about this. Total amount of spending in the economy does not depend on the velocity of money circulation. So is it true or false? So total spending in the economy equals quantity of money, how much money you have, times velocity of circulation. Velocity of circulation in the average number of times that the monetary unit changes hands, frequency of payments. So if we have in this class here $1,000 money distributed in some way among us, and then we make on average every day 3 transactions. Every monetary unit changes hands 3 times. So that will be the total spending will be $3,000 per day. But if the frequency of payments is greater, that every monetary unit changes hands 4 times instead of 3 times, could happen for whatever reason, the total amount of spending would be 4,000. So the answer is incorrect here. Velocity of circulation does affect total spending. Even with the same quantity of money, you can have higher total spending if money is spent more frequently. When interest rate increases, the supply of credit, ceteris paribus, will be. What happens to the supply of credit when interest rate goes up? This is interest, this is one credit, this is the supply curve. Let's say interest rate increases, supply of credit increases. People save more money when interest rate is high. So supply of credit will increase, all other things may be equal. Interest rate goes up. If marginal cost exceeds marginal benefit, the rational behavior would be to decrease the activity, decrease the level. True or false? The marginal cost, the level of activity that you are exercising right now, your marginal costs are greater than your marginal benefits. Is it rational for you to decrease the level of activity? Yes, it is. Until you bring your marginal benefits calculating wage. Marginal cost. Sticky wages lead to higher inflation during economic downturns. Is it correct? Is this correct? No. Financial panics? No. Higher unemployment during economic downturns. Well, that's correct. And lower unemployment. That's correct. Sticky wages prevent people from adjusting to lower price levels by reducing prices and wages. So they have to adjust by firing something. I have 10 employees and my revenue is enough to pay them $10 per hour. My revenue had gone down 10%. So I can keep going by reducing their wages by 8 or 10. Everyone's across the board 10%. But if the wages are set by long-term contracts, that I cannot do that, then the only thing that I can do is to fire one or two. That's why sticky wages lead to employment. Okay, natural unemployment and frictional unemployment. That's just a textbook definition. So the main things that I wanted to turn your attention to are the two of the three essay questions. The first one you did really well, the concave and linear production possibilities curve, the concave outward volume production possibilities curve are more realistic because they assume increasing opportunity costs of production, which is more realistic than linear constant cost of production. So most of you did this one either completely okay or mostly. Okay, so there's no need to spend time on that. The second one was exchange rates and the influence of exchange rates on aggregate demand. You did kind of okay here. But there are some mistakes. There are some small nuances that I wanted just to turn your attention to. Even people who got it right and eventually got the full points didn't provide a really precise answer that I was looking for. But I was a little bit lenient with this. Okay. If you had given me 70 or 80% of what was expected, okay, you gave it the full points. So here is the exchange rates between euro and dollar. And originally said it's 1 to 1.5. You need $1 for 1.5 euros. That's the exchange rate for the market. And then we assume that the exchange rate changes so as that for $1 now you can buy only 1.2 euros. The question you were asked is to explain what happens to domestic aggregate demand in the United States as a consequence of this. Can somebody briefly just review this? Aggregate demand. Can you tell me just which component of the aggregate demand is influenced by this change? Just one of them. There are I, C, G, and NX. NX here, the net exports. How is it influenced? So American value, the value of the American currency depreciates. Means now the dollar is worth less in terms of euros. How will that affect relative prices of American-made and European-made goods? It will affect them by making American goods cheaper than before. Why is that the case? Because Europeans earn their income in euros. Let's say that their income remained what it was in euros. But they want to import something from, and they pay for domestic goods in euros in the same prices as before. Yes, we say that the price levels remain similar in both countries to simplify the analysis. Imagine that they want to buy a good in America, to import, European import from America. Before, for $1, in order to buy on the currency market, $1, they had to pay 1.5 euros. Now they had to pay only 1.2 euros of their European earned income. So that means that they can get for the same real income in euros that they have, they can buy more dollars now than before, which means that they can buy more American goods than before. So Then the European import and US export, which is the same thing, increase. The consequence of that. So NX equals export minus imports in the United States. So exports goes up because Europeans are buying more American goods because they can get for the same euro income, they can get more dollars. They can buy for those dollars more American goods. What happens to Americans? They were buying 60 to 40% American goods versus imported goods. For $1 now, how many euros can you get? More or less than before? Less euros than before. So what was 1 over 140, 1 over 1.5. So now the exchange rate decreased. You can buy less euros for a single dollar of your American earning. So that means that for American importers of European goods, now it's a tough time. You can get less euros than before for your single dollar because of the depreciation of the dollar rate vis-a-vis euro. So that means that the American importation of European goods will decrease. And European exportation will decrease. So that means that exports goes up, American export goes up, and importation goes down in the same time as a consequence of this. So then NX increases because of both problems. So what most of you did correctly is actually to explain that this is depreciation of the currency rate, that this will lead then to the American goods being cheaper than the European goods, and as a consequence of that, the American export will increase because the European will buy more, and hence the aggregate demand will increase because the net exports will increase. That's a kind of generic answer. Most of you have forgotten this one here, rotation. And another reason why the net export will increase is not only that the export will increase, but also the import will go down. Okay, so just be mindful of that. I haven't penalized this time, but a kind of complete answer to the question would involve also taking into account the effects on the import, not only the export. Okay, that was a relatively minor problem. The real problem was with the last one. The last question with calculations of the CPIs. I've forgotten the numbers, I'm trying to remember. So you have year 2017, representative basket of goods, 2018, 2019. And I have given you the number of units, the products, and their prices per unit, and the changes in prices from year to year. And then I ask you to calculate for me the inflation rate of change in CPI for 2018, 2019. So actually you were supposed to do a two-step calculation here. So let's say whatever it was, I remember it was 160. I'm gonna watch the numbers now. Don't take me. If somebody remembers what are the numbers, you can tell me what we need to illustrate. 154.5, I believe. That's the dollar value of the representative basket of goods in the baseline year, 2017. And then it was something like 161, I believe. Or 100. No, 159, and then 167, something like that. So it's increasing, the value of the CPI is increasing. And I ask you, okay, calculate the inflation rate for me between these 2 years. And what 90% of you did in both groups, both this and the money group was, CPI 2 minus CPI 1 over CPI 1, that's the result. I'm going to do it right away. And what you did was 167 minus 159 over 159. You took the dollar values of the representative basket and calculated change in dollars and said that's the inflation rate. False. I have given actually partial credit even for this, 2.5 and 3 points. I mean, calculation. But the correct procedure is you calculate the baseline spending. Can anyone tell me now what is the proper procedure? CPI for 2017. What is it? What is the value of CPI for 2017? 100. 100. Yeah. What is the value of CPI for 2018? It's 159. For 2018 is 159. The total spending for the year 2018 over 154.5 or whatever the number was times 100. Okay, so that's CPI. Total spending in the year, in the next year, in the later year, over total spending in the baseline year, times 100, you get the CPI for the second year. And the same for CPI for 2019. It's a 167 over 154.5 times 100. And once you calculate that, then this is CPI 2 over CPI 1. We plug inflation rate equals CPI 2019 minus CPI 2018 over CPI 2018. And then when you, so most of you answered 8.4, 8.45, 8.30 something. That is the number that you get by just using those numbers, total spending numbers. When you calculate the CPI, the correct answer would be about 8.1 or something. 8.1%. Okay. So you see what was the missing step. The missing step in most of your calculation was actually correctly calculating CPI. By CPI for a given year is always calculated total spending in that particular year over total spending in the baseline year. Baseline is a year in which CPI is 100. Times 100, and if CPI is 106, what is the inflation rate between the baseline year and the later year? CPI is 106. 6%. There is also another weird mistake that some people make. Calculated CPI is correct. Let's say 100 for the initial year, 106 for 2018 or whatever it was, and then 112 for 2019. So hey, it's 6%. It's not 6%. You cannot. It's 100. It's 6 over 106. See, that applies only here. Here is 6 over 100 because the initial number is 100. You can just you get the same. Yeah, go ahead.
So even if it says like calculate the inflation rate between 2018 and 19, you have to use the 2017.
No, you have to use the CPIs are always calculated by using the baseline. This number is dictated by the relationship between total spending in that year and the total spending in the baseline year. It's always that way. And here it's your denominator is 106 now. So the correct change is 6 over 106 change over the initial later year minus earlier year over the earlier year. So here you get the same number whether you calculate it by subtracting or by subtracting this from that, or by using the correct formula, only because your denominator is 100. There is no difference. It's 6% whether you write down 106 minus 100, or you do 6 over 100. That's the same thing. It's 6%. 0.06 is the same thing as 6%. But when you compare the inflation rates between 2 years, none of which is the baseline year, then you have to you have to use the formula. You cannot just subtract and say it's 6%. It's not 6%. It's less than 6%. 5 and so on. 6 over 106 is okay. Less. Okay, so that's it. There is another weird mistake. Somebody did correct almost everything. There's one or two people who did this. But they calculated CPI actually not by calculating the total value of the representative basket, but just adding up the prices. Completely omitted quantities. So actually every step was correctly done, but for the omission of the quantities. So that for them, then the representative basket was like $45 instead of $155 because they counted every single item once. And again, I think that they get 3.5 or 4 points in those people because they were closest to the to the correct answer. But at any rate, I think maybe only 1 or 2 persons did the exact correct calculation for this question. Okay, so please bear in mind, try to remember how this works. That was my major problem. Everything else was pretty good, actually. I think that the average for the class is about 86, 87 students. So nobody failed. Nobody got less. Very few people got less than 70. I think that anyone got. Wait, any more questions about this? So we're going to move very swiftly to money and banking today. We're going to try and do almost impossible, which is to, in 2 class sections, cover the basics of money and banking. We'll start with the definition of money. What is money? Say the easiest definition is that money is a universally accepted medium of exchange. Medium of exchange. What is the medium of exchange? That's a good that serves as an intermediary in trade, exchange. So the basic form of exchange among people is something called barter. What's barter? Barter is a direct exchange. Good for good. I give you this, you give me that exchange. An apple for an orange, my pant for your wristwatch. Now, that's all well and good, but there are some inconveniences of barter. The main inconvenience, the main problem with the barter is something called double coincidence of wants. What is double coincidence of wants? That's a fact that in order to carry out a barter transaction, you have to find a partner who has exactly what you need, what you want to acquire, and who wants exactly what you have. It's a double coincidence. You have to have what the other guy wants, and you need to want what he has. So if you're exchanging wristwatches for pens in a barter, I will have to find a person who has a wristwatch and wants to exchange it exactly for the kind of pen that I have. And he has to find a person who wants to exchange pen for a wristwatch. So that's a pretty cumbersome, that's a pretty costly model of organizing a complex economy in which we have thousands of different types of products. So this double coincidence of wants creates the problem of transaction costs, very, very high transaction costs. Transaction costs are costs of reaching an opportunity to carry out a transaction. For example, search costs. You find, until you find an exact trading partner that you need if we take you a very long period of time. So barter is very inefficient in any community, in any economic setting that is larger than a small, whatever, household. Small, very small and simple economic unit. Maybe a very small village. Your neighbors sometimes, I grew up exchanging some stuff with my neighbors. I'll help you with that, you help me with this. So a barter of services also. With that tradition. I'll help you with the harvest, wheat harvest, if you help me with my grape. What is it? Grape harvest. Or I'll give you a sack of potatoes if you give me in exchange something else. A hog. Or 10 sacks of potatoes or something. So you see, in a very simple, primitive economic conditions, people use barter, but whenever the economy grows beyond the confines of a small household or a small village, we need something to reduce those costs of connecting people who want to trade. And money is an invention. Money is the main instrument of overcoming those perception costs. What is money? Money is an instrument of indirect exchange. So instead, good for good, that's direct exchange. Here you have good, money, and then for good. So it's still, your goal is to exchange this good, your pen, for a wristwatch. You want to acquire this good and to offer this. Just, it's not convenient, it's not easy for you to do it directly. No, you split up the transaction into two. Money is this intermediary, or so you sell a good for money, you get the money, and then you buy another good money. Now, why money? What is the secrets, quality of money that you can do, that you can split the transactions this way? Money is the most precious and most highly demanded good or commodity in any given community. That's money is just good, just like any other good, which is in a very high demand by a given community. Money will be whatever is considered the most precious and most highly esteemed commodity in any given society for whatever it is. And then the idea is it has to be a consumer good or commodity that is demanded as a consumer good beforehand. That's how people realize, that's how people learn that this is something useful. What is the most common form of money in Western civilization before the 19th century? What was the money before 1930s in the United States? Two metals. Gold and silver, yeah. Gold and silver are very high esteem, but the demand for gold and silver pre-existed money. People wanted, why did everyone like gold and silver? They were very scarce, and they're in very high demand for as a means of adornments and jewelry and so on. So there's silverware and so on. So there were prestigious metals that are used as consumer goods first. And then people realize that since this is the case, pretty much everybody would like to have gold or silver. If you're offering anything in exchange for gold and silver, pretty much everybody will accept gold and silver. So that's how money emerges, by a gradual process. Some commodity, some good emerges as the most saleable, most highly demanded good, and it serves as a money. It doesn't have to be gold and silver. So one of the best experiments that has shown that the money emerges on the market in this process of gradual learning was the experience of the prisoners of war camps in the First and Second World War. So the prisoners would get the parcels and all kinds of food, and their families will send different things to them, and they would be trading in those goods. I got chocolate, I don't like chocolate, then I exchange my chocolate for your bread or for something else that you have. Very quickly, something emerged as a money, as a universally accepted medium of exchange. in prisoners of war camps. You know what is that? Cigarettes. So at that time, it was the assumption that every single man older than 18 will smoke. And especially in the conditions of war, nicotine has this calming effect. So pretty much everybody was smoking. So then, even if you were not smoking, you would acquire, when offered a cigarette, you would take a cigarette because you knew that then once you need a Coke or a chocolate or a sandwich or something that you would want to acquire from somebody else, that person will accept cigarettes. So you see, the demand for money commodity has two components. Demand is a consumer good, demand for a cigarette as a cigarette, and also demand for a cigarette as a means of payment. The same applies to gold and silver. There's a demand for gold and silver as a means of adornment and jewelry and so on. It's consumer goods, but also demand for gold and silver as media of exchange. Okay. So what are the purposes or functions of money? So many other commodities historically served as monies. And some, depending, as I said, on what a given community considers to be the most valuable, the most important thing in life, they will select spontaneously different goods. In colonial Virginia, tobacco was money. 17th century, they didn't have regular money. They used tobacco, which was the most valuable consumer good in their minds at that time. So that was money. In some Pacific islands, they used the seashells. That's money, because they consider that to be the most valuable good. So, the functions of money are: the first one we just saw, the reducing transaction costs of exchange. To see how many more transactions you can carry out with money than without money. Imagine that you try to sell 5 minutes of your services as a mechanical engineer for a cup of coffee. You'll have to find somebody who needs instruction in some part of mechanical engineering who is growing coffee. You'll have to travel to South Africa to find a very weird peasant who wants to learn something about mathematics or physics in exchange for a little bit of his coffee beans. But it's impossible. Here, now with money, actually, what you do exactly, you exchange parts of your 3 minutes of your labor as a mechanical engineer that is paid in wages, in money, for a few hours of labor of some Colombian producer, coffee grower. Okay, so it's tremendously increases wealth by increasing the amount of possible transactions that are physical. Number two, equally important, maybe even more important, the unit of account. That's capitalism is impossible without money. It's a mass society based on mass production and consumption of goods and services, and integration of large areas of the globe into one economic systems are absolutely and categorically impossible without money. The first reason is this thing here, reducing transaction costs, allowing people who are not part of the same community or village or family to exchange goods and services. And exchange is useful. Why is exchange useful? Even if it doesn't lead to further production, further increased production. So I give you my pen in exchange for a wristwatch. We're the same two persons, and we have the same wristwatch and a pen, but we are economically better off after the exchange because the goods that exist are better matched with our preferences. They're distributed to the people who value them the most. Your wristwatch, I value your wristwatch more highly than you, and you value my pen more highly than I. Once we make the exchange, we're both better off. Although we haven't produced any new wristwatches in the past. Okay. Unit of account. So why is this important? Unit of account means that that's something, measuring stick that allows people to compare the values of heterogeneous products, heterogeneous goods. For example, to compare the value of revenues and costs. So revenues in dollars, it's price per unit times quantity produced. It's an objective measurement. It's a certain number of dollars. That's how much. What is the revenue? Revenue is an estimation of society by consumers how much value added you created. You produced 10 bicycles and you sold them on the market at the average price $50. You created $500 of value added to society. Now, how much value have you sacrificed or destroyed in the process? That's your cost of production. If you employ 3 people to work 8 hours for you, that's 24 hours of human labor per day that you waste. Not waste, but spend, destroy. That's the factor of production that somebody else could have used. Electricity that you use is also a resource that you destroy. Raw materials that you use, and so on and so forth. Now, in the absence of money, how would you compare? How would you add up the costs of production and express them in common units? 24 hours of labor by different people, certain number of kilowatts of electricity, certain quantity like of raw materials like steel and aluminum, and the office space that you occupy. Together as 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 different heterogeneous products that cannot be measured in the same common unit, any other common unit but for the money. So then money serves as a unit of accounting. $1, $2, $1.54 is a measuring stick that offers apples to apples, or dollar to dollar comparison of the things that you cannot compare dollar to dollar or apples to apples in any other fashion. So without monetary unit as a unit of accounting, you wouldn't have the ability to tell a good business decision from a bad business decision, because you couldn't make the cost calculations in any other way than through money. How would you estimate the value of your cost if you don't have this measuring stick, which is called money? And as one economist said, everything would be a leap in the dark. If there is no economic calculation, then there is no way for society to tell whether you increase the value of societal resources or decrease the value of resources by engaging in certain production processes. There wouldn't be profit and loss without money. Concepts of profit and loss are meaningless without money, because profit and loss are positive or negative difference between revenue and cost. If you don't have money, you cannot calculate the value of costs, because you cannot compare it to the value of revenue. This is the value that you destroy. This is the value that you create. So if you have a profit, that tells that's a piece of information to society that you added value, that you created value for the consumer. You cannot know whether you created or destroyed value on net without money as a unit of accounting, as a unit of economic calculation. Now, this dictates then certain characteristics of commodity monies, monies that serve as monetary unit condition. There are certain characteristics of natural monies. We'll see next time what is the modern money is a different beast. It's a fiat money dictated by the government. But the free market monies like gold and silver, they have to be first highly valued, the most saleable commodity, high demand. In order to be accepted as a universal medium of exchange, they have to be in a very high demand. Precious. Then the next two characteristics are related to this accounting function of money. Those are divisibility and fungibility. These two are connected. So what is fungibility? Fungibility means homogeneity, that it's the same good. For example, cars are not fungible goods because not every car is like any other, like all other cars. Whereas, for example, oil is a fungible good. If I give you 10 gallons of gasoline, it's as good as any other 10 gallons of gasoline in a certain category. There is a differentiation here as well. But a given category of gasoline is as good, or wheat, corn, are fungible goods. So gold is also fungible goods. Every piece of gold of a certain purity is equally good as any other single piece. Then divisibility. That means that it could be broken down easily and cheaply into equal units. Equal units of measure. Why is that important? Why is divisibility important? Both of these are important for the accounting function. You have to make sure that every piece, that every monetary unit is equal to every other. So you need them to be equal in character, in nature, and to be easily divided to equal units of dollar. So what $1 means? The original, just to illustrate for you why is this important. All modern currencies, dollars, euro, not euros, but the German marks, pound sterling, and so on, originally were just the names for a certain weight of gold or silver. The measure of value monetary unit was just how many silver, how much silver of a certain purity, certain level of purity it contains. Silver and gold are monies. A weight of gold is a measure for monetary unit. Initially, dollar didn't have any intrinsic value beyond the silver that it contained. But just a convenient name for a certain measure of, I forgot what it was. How many ounces of silver, pure silver, dollar coin contained. So the visibility is very important. And fungibility, also portability. Portability and durability. Durability is important for the third function of money. The third function of money is a means of saving, or I can say store of value. So money serves as a means of saving resources, which is necessary for investment. You want to save money for 3 months later, or to lend money to somebody. Let's say blueberries are very easily divisible. They might be fungible, blueberry source. But why blueberries are not very convenient to serve as money? If money has to store value over time, be a good that is preserves the value of resources over time. It rots very quickly. Most circumstances. So then money has to be something that is durable in order to store value over a longer period of time. That's the reason why gold and silver are selected by the market as monies. But it has also to be portable. What is portability? Omnium meum mecum portum. You know what is the Latin saying says. Everything that is mine, I carry with me. That means I don't care about wealth. That's my impression, my books, and that's everything that I have. Porto means to take, to carry with you. So easy to carry. So that it's not enough to be fungible, divisible, in high demand, and durable. Steel is very durable, but steel is not convenient to be money. Why steel is not a very good commodity to serve as money?
Kind of heavy.
It's heavy, and the quantities of steel that you need in order to buy a carton of milk is like 200 kilograms. It's very inconvenient to carry around the requisite quantities of steel to buy most of the everyday goods. So then portability, that the quantities, that the value of money commodity has to be matched very nicely to the demand for goods and services, to be such as to allow you to carry relatively manageable quantities of that easy easily handleable, easily handled quantities of that for the purposes of transaction. So that's the reason why gold and silver were the money. Silver was used for most ordinary transactions. The dollar, American dollar, was silver dollar, and most of the coins, so all the coins that we still have are silver coins. That's a remnant of the old system. Copper coins were for small change. Copper was the least valuable money. For medium-sized transactions, most consumer transaction was gold, and for the highest capital transactions, you know what was the main type of money? Gold. Especially there was a very highly valuable gold coin in Europe called ducat. You heard about ducat? It is Venetian Republic, the leading maritime nation in the Mediterranean, had this highly valued gold coin. So actually, it was used, for example, as a dowry for even in Eastern Europe for brides. They instead of land or any other renewable sources of wealth, she would bring like 5 ducats or 10 ducats. It's very highly for capital investment and for very large transactions with gold coins. Okay, we'll talk next time about banking and about what is money nowadays and how money came to be what it is now, like the paper money. Because I